Hey, how are you, everybody? We're going to do the after show, and it's going to be recorded. So usually what we do on this sort of after, the modelers and the people who are involved on the Zoom sometimes come into the program here, and we just start talking. It doesn't really have to matter about the topic. It might be just a topic you have a question on. It could be have a topic about what we saw tonight. And certainly as an N scaler, I was really impressed by Todd's presentation and the other presentations tonight. I thought Martin and Jim did a fantastic job on their presentations as well. So we'll open it up to the floor. Now, is anybody here maybe for the first time? We always like to get the first timers to say hello. Anybody here for the first time? Ah, there's a wave. Sir, you can unmute and tell us who you are and what you're modeling in. Let's see if I can unmute. Uh-oh, there's the, at least he doesn't have his evil
There's the button.
There you are.
Hi. Yes, yeah, I'm new to this area. I'm just currently started building a home layout up in my loft space here in my condo. So I'm just kind of curious as to what was the forum was all about. That's why I joined up. I primarily model both an HO and HON3. So that's my interest. I do belong to a large Mall River club here in the LA area, but my personal layout here will be mostly narrow gauge, which we don't have any on our club layout. So it's kind of like a chance to expand in my own interests.
All right. And what's your first name, sir? I don't.
Bob.
Bob. Hi, Bob. Welcome to the show. You don't belong to the Pasadena Club, do you?
Oh, them? Yes, I'm actually chairman of the board.
Oh, are you?
Yeah.
Oh, I happen to know several of the members, and I'm actually certified to run on the layout.
Oh, good.
Your former member, Karen Ely, was a very, very good friend of mine.
Yes, sad to have her pass away like that.
Yeah. So Peter, matter of fact, she trained me, and she sort of with some of the other guys
okay.
Bob, you don't run the yard down below, do you? That's not you.
No. I actually usually run, well, lately I've been running the Your Branch. We call it McSweeney.
Yeah.
And so that's at the south end of the room, near the south aisle. I've actually been running that of late. We just had our first post-COVID open house, as a matter of fact, which was very successful. We got a lot of people came in, and that was very enjoyable to have that many people there.
Yeah.
If you've been there for a show, you probably have heard me, because I do the MC duties as well at the club. So, and if you were trained by Karen, then you were indirectly trained by me, because I trained Karen.
Okay. All right. Yeah. And Bruce and Mike are friends, and the gentleman who does a lot of your track work, and I forget his name now, but I'm involved with Fast Track, so I set him up with some equipment.
Mike Panton.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, speaking of Fast Tracks, I have the dual gauge jig here for the number 6s.
Oh, perfect. Well, so, as a HON3er myself, I'm all with you.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
I got about 30 turnouts to build, though.
Well, no problem. If you need any help, give me a shout.
Okay.
But yeah, no, that's great. Well, glad to have you along, Bob. Anybody else new here? Martin, you're not new. All right. Anybody else want to just jump in?
What did you all think about the N-Scale tonight?
Being an O-scaler, I was very impressed. I was blown away with a yard with 3,200 cars. You know, we're lucky to have 40 cars on our layout in my scale, and with an average, you know, model size room for modeling. So yeah, that was fantastic.
I wish I had the kind of money that Todd has wrapped up in his layouts on his cars.
I was thinking about that, but that's only money.
Yeah, it's only money.
I thought the interesting perspective, I put this in the chat, you know, you have to remember that the ratios here are interesting. So, you know, if you assume that N has a volume of 1, HO is 6.25, and O is 52. So that means you can put 52 times as much stuff in a volumetric space in N as you can in O. Now,
Right.
clearly, so if you think about that yard, think about how much room you would have to do that yard in O scale.
Tremendous amount.
And so I think it's interesting that from a modeler perspective, the width of your rails is inversely proportional to the scale you choose. Right? So if you choose narrow gauge, you can go to a larger scale. But within that, you kind of are, if you want to do modern railroading, you've got a certain space, you end up coming to the conclusion that N's the only way you can do an effective model.
Right.
What
I mean,
surprises me is that there aren't more manufacturers who have offered up buildings and kits and everything in N scale like they have in HO. You go into any of the online stores, which you almost have to because there aren't many hobby shops around, and you'll see 20 times more HO stuff than you will N. Of course, the O scalers are even worse off, but the manufacturers anymore seem to have really lost sight of the fact that that you can do a lot more with N scale, and the quality is so much better now. Jim, you're going back to the 1960s and 70s, and yeah, you bought an N scale engine back then, and you're lucky if you get it to run 3 feet down the track. But the stuff they're coming out with today is just amazing. You'd have to see a scale trains locomotive in N scale and be absolutely blown away by the amount of detail and the running qualities and the operating qualities that today's equipment has. And you'd be really amazed. I'll have to put together something on my layout and show you some of the stuff that I have. And nowhere near.
I really wish you would, because I'm convinced that part of the problem with N-Scale today, people may not be my age, but the people that are, I guess, in the 50s, the 60s and older, their memories are N-Scale was not an operating scale that they could deal with, because you had to be, you know, not a modeler, you had to be a perfectionist modeler to get the thing to run around the track twice.
Yeah, very true.
And it just wasn't worth the time and the effort that, you know, that you had to spend to get something that was in any way an operating railroad. And I don't think the N-Scale hobby is talking about the difference today versus what a lot of us remember N-Scale to be.
I have a question about N-Scale too, because when I look at it and I look at an operating or a switch, when people build a switching module in HO and in O, I can understand how you can do that. And maybe it's just because I'm blinded by the size of it. Can you actually do switching and that kind of operation in N-Scale?
Absolutely.
And it comes off like you can put together trains, you can, I mean, I have trouble with that concept. I'll be honest with you. And maybe it's my age, I don't know.
Well, I do it all the time. In terms of operations, my layout that I'm working on now, I'm building, is designed primarily for operations. I don't have a continuous run loop.
Mhm.
I run point to point. My biggest feature is prototypical switching into industries that are, most of them are on the actual railroad that I'm modeling, which is the Reading and Northern in Eastern Pennsylvania.
Can I ask a question about that? I mean, do you do that in the same idea that you would use remote control switch or like uncouplers and that kind of thing,
No.
or is it manual or?
No, everything is manual. I throw my switches manually. I couple and uncouple my cars manually. Cars
When
are
you-
uncoupled by using a pick that goes
Okay.
down into microtrains couplers. Just put pick in it.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty standard too, a lot of times in HO, and I just wondered, so the couplers will actually work the same way then, in a sense?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I found really that trying to do it with magnets, using the microtrains couplers are magnetic couplers.
Yeah,
I chose not to use that because I found that a lot of times I have false uncouplings, especially if I had a magnet under the main line and it was a place where maybe the train went over a rise and back down, and you get a bunching and a slacking in the cars. They don't couple, because that's all it takes is to get slack in your couplers, and they'll come right apart.
so, I mean, I know that this is probably an ignorant question as far as like my own ignorance, but when you're actually doing an uncoupling, say in an N scale switching operation, do you not run the risk of knocking the cars over, or do they move, or like?
Well, not if you're careful.
Yeah.
I mean,
As I say, I'm probably ignorant because I've never done it, and it's just one of these things that I look at it, and I mean, that's one of the things that I like is operations, so that's always sort of kept me away from N scale or even looking at it.
well, my layout is designed as walk around. Most of it is a foot to 15 inches wide, and I can reach any track, any turnout, any car, locomotive I can reach from the aisle. So if I'm going to switch it into an industry, I stop on the main line, back up just a tad to get some slack in the coupler, stick a probe down in the coupler, a little pike, or you can even use a skewer, like a skewer stick, and just pop, coupler pops apart, you pull your engine ahead, and you've done a drop. And
But I'm actually, like glad to hear that. Like I always kind of, as I say, I guess like I've just remained ignorant on that part of it, because like Jim, I looked at N scale years ago and just scratched my head as to why anybody would have it years ago.
well, the biggest difference is you got to be able to get up close to it so that you can see what you're doing, number one. Because your couplers are tiny, the cars are tiny, and yeah, you can knock the cars off the track if you're clumsy about it. But I prefer that over trying to use tortoise switch machines and electromagnetic uncouplers under rails and all that kind of stuff. Because
I much prefer to actually do it in a manner that say like a real railroad, like in HO, the Sergeant couplers, they were ideal because you actually had to use them the way that the real railroads used couplers, and that actually burns up time. So on a small layout, it makes the operating actually interesting. That's my theory, and like others are welcome to have their own theories. And I'll shut up because you answered my question. But I was always curious about the operating of it, despite what Clark might say.
But no. Now I'm gonna just refresh your memory because it is your birthday. So
Oh yeah, please.
Do you remember this layout in Milwaukee?
Oh yes.
Now
Yes,
that
I
is a
do.
fantastic N scale layout.
Yeah.
And he does operation, and I don't know if you remember if you were there that night that we were there when he had a gang over to do operations.
No,
And-
I missed that. So
Yeah.
that's why I've always been kind of curious about the operating in N scale. That that one's has always left me head scratching.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right now-
I sold N scale couplers and all the rest of it, and I worked with people trying to convert things
Yeah.
when I worked with the hobby end of it. And it always baffled me as to, like, could you actually do anything with this stuff?
Yeah, but and I think some guys now, I know a couple of older guys who are into N scale, and instead of switching one car, they'll maybe switch 4 cars, so they're kind of in a string. But they have also bigger industries, so like they might switch out 5 or 6 grain cars, and
Boy,
rather
I mean,
than
I love that end of N scale where you can get the panorama and the fact that you can actually get a whole train.
yeah, and that is the fantastic thing of N scale. And a lot of people say, well, I think the details there, and actually it's amazing how your eye will trick you to believe that the detail is actually there, to a certain point.
Yeah, that's kind of
whereas
like
when you look in O scale, you expect to see a nut bolt washer by a handrail because it should be there.
Yeah.
Where in N scale, your eye automatically goes, oh, I'm sure there's one there. But it is totally different today, as Dave said. As you know, and with Steve and that were involved with the T-Track guys, and
Yeah,
it is
I mean, that
fantastic.
was an eye opener to me, but then Steve basically said they just run the trains around. So
Yeah, well, at a show, right?
Yeah.
At a show, that's what happens. But there's a lot of guys that do operations. So as Dave said, it is fascinating. It is fascinating. So
yeah. I'm too far gone on the big stuff though.
yeah. Dave May, have you got audio? Do you want to jump in? I'm going to say no. Okay, Dave, thank you. Who else? Hey, Al, how are you tonight? You have to unmute.
Well, if I want to talk, I do.
Oh, I see you're in one of those moods.
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good.
I just got my snow blower out and greased it and oiled it, so I'm ready for,
Yeah,
Don't mention that, please.
yeah.
But
Not
I put
yet.
it back for a while.
It was spectacular up here last week. The colors and everything were almost as like Dave Silvernail's layout, all nice and fall. And then all of a sudden it's rained since, I don't know, Thursday, and has never stopped. So I don't know if there's many.
Count yourself lucky. Rain still has color. It's the other stuff that's all white.
I know, but there isn't much leaves left on the trees up here now.
The color's all on the ground now.
That's right.
We lived in Costa Rica, we wouldn't have to worry about this.
No, you just have to worry about hurricanes.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
we're
Never
supposed to
mind
have
Costa
rain here.
Rica.
Only for about another month.
So
I've always been fascinated with Costa Rica. And I met a guy in, the train conventions. Actually, it was in Amherst. We got chatting and he said, oh, I've lived in Costa Rica for 30 years. He says, it's great as long as you got a screened in porch.
and people thought our spring was bad with mosquitoes.
And do you get black flies that far up your way?
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah.
That goes without saying.
I have left the lawnmower running and ran for the house. So, but yeah, it can be. Apparently at the airport in the spring, there was a pilot landing, and the guy said, well, you'll have to go around one more time. He says, we got 4 mosquitoes and 18 black flies ahead of you.
I worked up in the Yukon for a while, and they have T-shirts that they sell at the airport and all the variety stores. and it's called the Yukon Air Show, June 1st to September 1st. It's got a big picture of a mosquito on the front.
Right.
Hey, Clark.
Yes,
John
John.
I'm going to take exception to the kind of, let's call it, everything ran bad in the 80s and 70s with N-Scale.
You're right.
If you picked your brands, and a lot of them were not US brands, if you picked the Rocos, the Fleischmans, and some of the other stuff that was around at that time, you could get very, very sweetly running Locos that would run forever.
You are
DC.
correct, actually, yes. But they weren't necessarily, if any of them, North American prototype stuff.
Yeah. I've got an Aurora postage stamp locomotive. It was made by Minitrix. It's an F3.
Yes.
Don't put a scale ruler near it anywhere to compare it with today's F3 dimensions. But hey, it was an F3 outline. It ran on 9mm tracks, and the thing ran like a Swiss watch.
It
You
did,
couldn't
and
kill it.
I have an ABA unit of the same thing.
Okay.
There's not
Well-
much paint left on it, but
Hey, well, I repainted mine, so
yeah.
it ain't original by any stretch of the imagination. And given it was a brush painted paint job,
Yeah.
yeah.
As Todd mentioned, John, about the Fleshman, Rocco, even the Trix stuff, and Arnold. I had an Arnold steam locomotive that ran beautifully.
I've still got one. It's the Bavarian S3 Pacific, S36 Pacific.
Okay.
It's a 4-cylinder job,
Yeah.
or the prototype was a 4-cylinder job. And Arnold did a Rheingold set in blue and cream that looked absolutely magnificent. So I've got that matched up against one of them.
Yeah. But in general, though, when you went to go buy a set at that time in N scale, unless you were buying the F7 or the F3 or that in the postage stamp set, boy, it was hit and miss on stuff that ran.
Well, you had the F3, but Minitrix also was doing a K4 at the time that was just about unbreakable as well. Again, it was a Minitrix K4. It was 1980 standard. Don't put a scale ruler all that close to it, but yes, it looked like a K4 and it could tow a significant number of boxcars behind it.
Right.
Where you got your boxcars from and how well they ran, that was another argument.
Yes.
Really, really tough to put MBWs on though.
Yes.
Well, you talk about operas. I wish Jim was still on here, but back in the late 70s, I think it was 1977, I went to a PNR regional convention in Vancouver, BC, and there was a guy there demonstrating an N-scale layout with operating overhead wire. He would slip a piece of paper under the wire and the locomotive would come to it and stop. I don't remember, I think this guy was Canadian. Reiger is a name it's been a long time ago, so I don't remember exactly, but he had operating overhead wire and N-scale.
Yeah, look, the Europeans had operating catenary on N-scale at least from the early 80s, and it ran as well as power coming up from the track. In fact, that was one of the tricks. certainly the Fleischmann locos and the Roco locos, you had a switch on the loco where you could select either pantograph feed or track feed. So with DC, you had the capability of running 2 trains on the same track, one being fed off the overhead, one being fed off the track. So
Yeah, and that solved a lot of the electrical issues.
yeah, and the beauty of the pantograph was it was basically self-cleaning. So as your pantograph skating along on the overhead conductor,
Right.
it's got some upward spring in the pantograph to keep it in contact. And it's effectively scraping any corrosion that you're getting on that upper wire clean off.
Yep.
So your electrical conductivity to the motor, if you're running a well set up overhead, with some of the Fulgurex or Sommerfeld overhead that was available, the performances could be pretty darn good.
Yep.
But it took a fair bit of setting up.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure this guy was using scratch build overhead.
Yeah.
And as far as operating, a few years ago, I had a kind of unique experience. I did a period of about 4 or 5 days. I operated on an N scale layout, an HO scale layout, and an O scale layout. And I did not believe it when I was told that they were operating N scale using picks for uncoupling. But after you derail the first couple cars uncoupling, you get the hang of it, the operation was just fine.
Yeah.
I don't know how much notoriety he got outside of the Puget Sound area, but a guy named Al Frask had a really nice N scale layout that he operated regularly. He has since moved out of the area and the layout's been torn down. But another N scale layout down in Olympia, Washington, that's a huge layout that he operates fairly regularly. I have seen it a number of times in open houses, but I haven't gotten down there for an op session. Is Jim Yonkins has a great N scale layout and they operate regularly. And with picks uncoupling.
Yeah,
So
and like you say, there's little tricks to it. You know, you may want to put your finger on one car and use the pick, and you learn all those little tricks as you go. So,
But one thing with Al's, he used skewers, but he shaped the ends and polished it so it was tapered and smooth. And since operating on his layout, I've started using round toothpicks in a handle as the picks for my HO. O scale is a slightly different animal. There's a little plastic pick that I forget who makes it, that Lee, the guy that he started using down there that worked well.
yeah, there's a lot of, and a lot of people don't spend enough time on their KDs when they install them to get them right. I think if people do that, you're going to find it so much easier to uncouple, whether using magnets or the picks. So.
Well, the thing I found with the KD magnets is the between the rails magnets, they don't pull the pins far enough apart.
No,
to really work. You need the under the ties.
Yeah.
And nowadays, have not done it and probably won't, but I think I would go with the rare earth magnets under the ends of the ties.
Yeah, I've experimented with that myself, Ted, and I've had mixed results. I think I should go to a bigger earth magnet than what I was using. So
Yeah, most of my freight cars, I cut the glad hand pins off.
yeah,
I'm leaving them on passenger cars, and I'm going to use magnets to uncouple passenger cars, because you can't get a pick in with the diaphragms. So.
right.
And I've made my own. I thought I had it handy, but yeah, here it is. I've made this.
Oh yeah, yep,
I copied it from the old Ricks,
right.
and I use this for uncoupling the passenger cars. And I'm not doing routine switching. It's only while I'm making up a train or something that
Sure.
it's not a regular thing. And you can't uncouple by picking them up either, because the knuckle hits the bottom of the diaphragm. So
Yeah. Hey, Todd, glad to see you came back. You can unmute yourself and join in if you'd like. And Bruce, you too. Bruce Crosby, if you want to jump in, say hello.
Yeah, thanks. I just came back to see what was going on. I had to go get the lovely wife so she could get to bed, and I'm going to go to bed before long because 4:30 comes awfully early to go to work. So
Yeah, I used to do that, but not so much anymore.
I hated shift work.
Yeah. We got some neat people on here, Todd, that very wide experience of jobs. Al here was a helicopter pilot, and I myself was a paramedic for over 34 years, and I know there's Larry was did a lot of stuff, and I know Chris, you were in, I want to say, the military, right, Chris? Yep. See, I pay attention once in a while. So,
Yes, sir. You sure do. I appreciate that.
So,
Mr.
but-
Todd, before you run off,
yes.
yes,
that was a hell of a switching yard you got.
it keeps you busy.
My household six came in, she looked at me and she utterly said, and I quote, "Fuck no."
Hey, watch it. This is being recorded, this after show. You have to watch the language.
Yes.
Okay,
Are we
I'll
past
apply
the
my
half hour yet?
No, but we're going to get to it soon.
All
I think
right.
I just switched the cars at the end of the track, not the center.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Clark, that was my one screw for the month. I'll be a good boy. now.
No, you're good. You're good. You go blame it on the glue.
Question for Todd.
I haven't opened
Yes.
it yet.
John from Australia has got a question for you, Todd.
Yes.
Any of your early stuff from Europe, have you still got the original Arnold Rapido couplers on that, or did you swap them out for KDs or microtrons?
All of my Arnold Rapido from the very first editions on all have the original couplers on.
Uh-huh.
The only thing I put KDs on or microtrains was the some of the Haiku box cars that they did that actually Walthers brought over, and I did some changing over to them because I run them on the layout.
Yeah.
And that, other than that, but my very first stuff is still all the original couplers, and even the horn hooks, the hook couplers, the metal hooks that they hooked. I had still all original.
Okay, yeah. I got into N-scale probably late 70s. And there was virtually no Australian N-scale in existence at the time. So if you wanted Australian, you kind of chose something that looked something like it, and then you bashed the living daylights out of it till it looked something like it did in Australia.
Yeah. Ivertrin in Italy made a strange looking Alco that was kind of something like the stuff that was in Australia.
Yeah, well, that's our 44 class. It's an Alco World Series, and
yes,
Yeah, Spain ran them, Greece ran them, India ran them. They were quite a wide. We ran them on 2 gauges, standard gauge at 5'3".
Yeah.
So yeah, the Ibertron stuff when it came out resonated with the Australian N scale to the extent that they kind of did some kind of repainted Spanish wagons.
Yes, they did. There's somebody had one of the Ibertron Alcos on there in an Australian paint scheme.
I've got a fleet of about 8 of them.
Yeah, and I ran it up on eBay and I didn't get it.
Some of the stuff coming out in N scale now in Australia is absolutely spectacular, but they're around about $300 Australian a locomotive. So, and it's all modern image stuff.
Yeah, I knew it was. I knew they were doing a few things. I have a couple things, but it's just,
Yeah, with what you've got, the last thing you need is Australian.
Well, I try to have something. I try to have something from every country that's made. If it was made, I even have some Russian equipment.
Okay.
That was made by Pico in East Germany back in the 70s.
Yeah.
And they made a couple different paint schemes in the Russia locomotives, and I have those.
Some of that
they're very hard to find. Very hard.
Some of those Pico locos run very well too.
Yeah, believe it or not, I've actually ran these things, and they actually don't run bad. And they have a strange gearing system to them too. That's really weird. They got these big idler gears off the motor that run something on the truck, and then the truck spins back and forth on the idler. It's really a strange looking thing, but they do work.
Okay, well, I'll stop tying up time. I'm going back to mute.
All right, thanks, John. Anybody else have any questions, comments, overall? All right. Go ahead, Todd. Sorry.
It was a pleasure, and I enjoyed it, and I'll join you again here at some point.
Yeah, that'll be great. And I think the consensus were when you at the beginning was everybody was like, "Oh, I hope he shows us how to build those buildings." That was great.
Like I said, I had to go, and I just want to come back and see if things were going on yet. And
yeah, we sort of do this after show now. This is the first time we're recording it. Usually we just chat, and then guys start falling by the wayside as they have to go to work the next day, or the retired guys still yak. Or if the sports comes on, then we have to leave. But you can tell who the sports guy is. But yeah, please come back and join in. And I'm a rubber gauger. I probably have enough N scale to fill maybe half one of your cases. But I have right from Z or Z scale to.
Is there a scale made you don't have?
Probably not. No.
Well, then I fall in that line too, because I have some S gauge, I got some HO, I got some O, I got.
Do you need any SN3?
I have some SN3. I have about everything there is.
Oh well, see, this is why I like you.
At some time or another, it fell into my lap, and I'm like, well, I can't get rid of it. So
yeah.
Sometimes she says to me, well, you should get rid of some of this stuff. I can't. I just can't do it.
Yeah. I hear you. One of the things that you talked about, and when I do clinics and so forth, I always stress this about the foundation. I know some guys getting in the hobby go, well, I can't afford to do that, and I go, well, you're better off to afford it now, like you said, right, and only have like 4 really good engines and 20 cars than buying the $5 junk pieces, and it doesn't matter what scale. And sometimes I get ridiculed about it and go, well, I don't have money. Well, you're better off to save your money and buy the best stuff you can buy at the time.
There's truth to that, Clark, because one of the saddest things I ever saw was a guy who had a basement full of junk. And I mean, literally junk, because none of it would run.
Yeah.
And he thought it was, I mean, God help it, he was having fun. But I kept thinking to myself, like, how much more fun could he have had he bought something that actually ran?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Todd, Todd, before you run off, my name is
Yeah.
Kenny Nomiya. I was wondering on that, what is it, a 50-something inch yard you have there?
Mhm.
How do you get to the other end when you got something on the ground?
We don't put stuff on the ground, hopefully. And if we do, I have a heavy ruler with a piece of two-sided tape. I just reach over and pluck the car off if I have to, but I've only had to do that twice.
So
far.
you use a lint roller?
No, I have one of the Atlas track cleaning cars that actually has a vacuum on it. I run that through the yard.
Oh, I
and
meant
that
to pick
cleans
up
all
a
the-
car.
Oh no, to pick up the car. I never thought of that. A lint roller would work. Yeah, that might. You know,
And now they're
Make one
using-
big enough for
that's
all
why
scale.
I don't go for all the detail parts, because if you do stuff like that, the detail parts fall off or they get broken off. And if you lose a detail part, that's you ain't finding it. I don't care how hard you look, you ain't finding it.
Well, I think, thank you very much, Todd, for joining us. I think for tonight, we're gonna stop the after show live performance. Now, we may continue on without the recording, and we'll go from there if any of you guys are still interested in yakking.
I would love to yak, but it's time for bed.
I hear you.
Okay.
You got
Thank
it.
you
You
guys
got it.
very much.
You gotta watch for
Thank
those
you
big
for being
green
here.
signals.
Yep. Thank you.